It's going to be the Amber Steel player to the left and the Emerald Amethyst player to the right. It is Jonathan to the right. And I'm not certain how to pronounce this name. And I'm going to double check. It's going to be Guillaume to the left. So Guillaume versus Jonathan. Guillaume playing Amber Steel songs. Jonathan playing Emerald and Amethyst. So Guillaume, 19th seed from Swiss. Jonathan, the 35th, which does mean that Guillaume is going to have the license here to go first, which when you're playing Daisy Ducks, could be a very big advantage indeed. Of course, the Mulligan in Lorcana, you start with 7 cards. You can get rid of as many as you wish and then draw that many new cards as well. So you've got a lot of agency over what you have in your opening hand. And I can see Jonathan actually with a Cursed Merfolk in the opening hand. Now, while they're going second, Baker, against Amber Steel, Jonathan, you could be tempted to mulligan the Merfolk away, which seems unthinkable, but Guillaume could open with a Cinderella, for example, and then use Let the Storm Rage On, remove the Merfolk. So Jonathan, of course, with the Merfolk being uninkable, could consider mulliganing it away. I know I would be tempted to do so.
And it's interesting because if Jonathan was going first, it could be a very different situation, because if Jonathan was going first, he would potentially have the ability to play the Ursula Deceiver on turn 2 before the Steel Song player gets the chance to potentially sing Storm Rage On or something with the Ballroom Sensation Cinderella to remove the Merfolk. So there's our first example of the play draw really influencing your the way you're going to play and potentially how you mulligan as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And of course, Guillaume being the player going first, is going to mulligan first, and Jonathan therefore is allowed to wait for Guillaume to mulligan before they commit to how many cards they wish to mulligan themselves. It does look like Guillaume is going to be holding on to that Cinderella. No surprises there. Bare Necessities, Pete, and even considering holding on to that Cinderella, Stout-Hearted as well. 2 Rapunzel gifted with healing and a Zeus seem like the favorites to be getting rid of. But Guillaume also decides to get rid of that Cinderella Stout-Hearted. Jonathan now, while he's seen how many cards Guillaume is mulliganing, then commits to theirs to just withhold as much information as possible. If Jonathan goes, I'm going to mulligan 7, Guillaume suddenly might feel a little bit more comfortable about keeping a safe hand. So Jonathan going second, just taking every advantage that they have their right to do so.
Yeah, and in that mulligan, potentially being aware of the power of Ursula Deceiver on 2, maybe wanting to be a bit conservative in the mulligan, not only to make sure that you have enough ink, because these Steel Song decks do run quite a few uninkables, but also just lower the chances that you're going to draw into other songs. Doesn't want to get a whole new world or something like that just snapped away for nothing. So definitely something to think about when considering the mulligan.
Yeah, so I do believe it was 5 cards mulliganed by Jonathan. I think the cards to the right were kept, and the cards in front are the new ones. It'll be really interesting to see if we can spot whether that Cursed Merfolk was in fact mulliganed away, because I think that's something people will be really surprised to see. You've got a Cursed Merfolk, of course you're going to keep it. Well, in an open deck list, that Cinderella on turn 1 can just get rid of it as soon as possible. The thing is, Baker, you don't want Cinderella to be able to sing a song on turn 1, because on turn 2, you might be able to discard that song with your Ursula Deceiver. So Cursed Merfolk might just be better not on the board at all, and therefore I think it was an interesting option to mulligan away from Jonathan. I am really interested to see if they agree.
Yeah, no, you make a really good point. You may want to draw into that later in the game when the Steel Song player has less resources. It's less likely they're going to be able to immediately answer it. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see if it was kept. We've seen to have the Bare Necessities, the Piglet, the Pete, the Cinderella, the Whole New World, Robin Hood, and a 2-cost card. I think that's a Mr. Smee. That's not a bad opening hand.
There is no Cursed Merfolk in the hand for Jonathan, so it was mulliganed away.
Nice.
Pretty inkable hand. We are just going to be having a short little break in just a moment before we get back on into the action. So the mulligans have been complete, and don't panic, you're not going to be missing any action at all. Just making sure everyone is ready to go for the start of this next round.
But yeah, Emerald Amethyst it's great to see it performing well over the course of the weekend. It was a deck that was super strong in set 3. Set 4 very much fell off, unfortunately. I think Bucky had a large part to do with that. An early season, you weren't seeing a lot of EA tempo. I've run the numbers, I've had a look. I think some players were still not sure if it was safe to go back to it yet, but it seems to perform pretty well over the course of the weekend. It's like just the tempo style of the deck, trying to constantly stay ahead, utilizing things like Ursula Deceiver, Lyle to give Reckless is one of my favorite cards over the course of the weekend. So it's going to be super interesting to see how this match goes down. And of course, you mentioned earlier, Joe, that Ursula versus Bare Necessities to snipe those either songs or just non-character cards could be game-changing in this matchup.
Yeah, it certainly could. And what's interesting, we did even see some Emerald Amethyst decks topping events, despite Bucky and Emerald Steel being so prevalent. But we are ready to go. It's going to be Bare Necessities into the Inkwell. Guillaume opening with that Cinderella on turn 1, which is possibly the best turn 1 play in the game when you're going first, because you're able to sing things like Let the Storm Rage On. Jonathan, no Merfolk in hand as they mulliganed it away. No Merfolk played, and I think that is absolutely brilliant play from Jonathan. Really like to see that. There are actually, though, no songs available for Guillaume to sing with Cinderella, but there is an uninkable song in hand. So if Jonathan has that Ursula Deceiver, it could be goodbye to Whole New World. Of course, it is an uninkable card, so Guillaume doesn't have that luxury of putting it into the Inkwell to play around Ursula Deceiver, and that is the cost of playing some uninkable songs. You can get left in some positions where you really don't want to play into Ursula Deceiver, but you have no choice at all. Mr. Smee's going to come down for 2 ink. Cinderella is going to quest for 1.
So, Joe, I'm just taking a look through these deck lists for these players, and one card in the EA Tempo list that could be very game-changing is the Ursula Sea Witch Queen. The Floodborn Ursula stops any player, not just your opponent. You can't either. Can't exert to sing songs, which could really slow down the game plan of the Steel Song player. So that's a card to look out for. There's also a Bell, Accomplished Mystic, in the deck, a card I know you like a lot.
There we go. It's the Ursula on turn 2. Guillaume lays out the hand, and it is going to be the Whole New World discarded. This is the game plan often for Emerald decks up against Amber Steel. Disrupt your opponent. Don't let them get that Whole New World through, and Ursula Deceiver is a great card for doing that. And as Baker mentioned, that Ursula Sea Witch Queen in Jonathan's deck, 2 copies of it, is going to be a potential shift option. It costs 7 usually, but it's got a shift 5 ability. So that Ursula Deceiver, even better when pairing it with Amethyst because of the shift potential. Guillaume with 2 characters on the board, and a Piglet could be waiting to join them. Smee's going to quest for 2. Guillaume at 3 lore now.
And of course, that Sea Witch Queen with a 4/7 stat line is super, super good. Quite hard for a lot of decks to get over. But of course, Steel Song has Zeus and things like that. But going to be a super interesting card in the matchup. We're going to ink that Piglet, play the Pete, which is going to shut down actions from the opponent. 1 damage on that Mr. Smee because there are no other captains on the board. And passing it back over to Jonathan.
Yeah, Guillaume has given Jonathan the red card for this turn. No actions allowed. That's what the referee, Pete, has said. And look at that. Jonathan doesn't just have an Ursula Sea Witch Queen hand in Baker, but it is, in fact, an enchanted Ursula Sea Witch Queen, which is, of course, the prize card from the previous Ursula's Return Set Championships.
It's the Set Championship one, is it?
I believe so.
I wondered if it was that or the one from the basic pack. But yes, nonetheless, a beautiful card, a strong card. We're going to bounce that Ursula Deceiver back to hand with the Snake. Great play. Ursula Deceiver is online quite a lot against Steel Song. We're going to ink. And down comes the Rafiki Mystical Fighter, a card that we're not seeing a lot these days, but has a 0/2 stat line, but Challenger 3 when challenging. So, yeah, just a nice, cheap character that can provide some good damage output.
Yeah, Guillaume does draw into Ariel, which usually would be music to their ears, but they have just seen that Ursula Deceiver bounced back into Jonathan's hand. So if Guillaume was to find a song which costs 4 or more, they wouldn't be able to sing it, possibly wouldn't be able to ink it if it's something like a Zeus, a Grab Your Swords, a Whole New World, and it could just play right into Jonathan's hand with that Ursula. What's interesting, Baker, if Jonathan hadn't played the Snake this turn, next turn, they could have gone to 4 ink. They could have played the Snake and played the Ursula and maybe caught Guillaume more off guard. Instead, though, Guillaume going to use the synergy between Rapunzel and Smee to heal Smee and draw a card.
Yeah, finds that Cinderella Stout-Hearted, and we do have the shift target on the board, the Borum Sensation. We're a couple of ink away from actually being able to play it, but that was a card that single-handedly, I think, won the game for Guillaume against the red-blue player, the Ruby Sapphire player. Got that Stout-Hearted down super early, and it just couldn't be interrupted. So Guillaume going to hope to have a repeat performance here for the Cinderella Stout-Hearted. Such a powerful piece of this Steel Song deck.
Guillaume with the early lead, of course. They are the highest seed and is the player going first in game 1. It's 3 lore to nothing as it stands, but with the potential to quest for 4 this turn. Be surprised to see that Cinderella being exerted here, though, with the Cinderella stout-hearted. And in fact, Guillaume takes one of these plays which really signifies a high-level player. Instead of questing, they do nothing at all, Baker. That was a really pivotal play we saw yesterday, someone do something similar. They're just waiting for the right moment to strike.
Yeah, 100%. If you can create, get to a turn where it's not so simple for your opponent to just, okay, well, I just challenge you and remove your characters. You want to create situations where they have to make choices. So, yeah. A great start from our Steel Song player. We're going to quest for 1 with Rafiki.
You don't often see Rafiki quest for 1 because it has a 3-2 stat line when it's challenging, but when it's challenged, 0 strength, and that is not much strength at all. But it could be being bounced back. It's going to be the Ursula Deceiver being replayed here. Jonathan is not going to be happy to see that hand. No songs and a Cinderella stout-hearted, which could shift in on the next turn.
Absolutely. I do believe there's a 5th spirit in Jonathan's hand, but we're not at that point yet where we... Oh, it might not be. It's a rabbit. There are... I do believe there's 5th spirits in the deck. Yeah, there certainly are, but we're not even there yet. But that's a nice way to be able to exert characters like Cinderella and remove them from the board. But I think by that point, we may already have a stout-hearted. We're going to play down the snake to bring back Rafiki. Makes a lot of sense why that Rafiki quested.
Yep, certainly does. 2 snakes on the board. Pretty good stat line on those snakes, can make some pretty good trades, but the Cinderella stout-hearted is notoriously difficult to remove once it enters the board. Usually costing 7, but being a Floodborn, it has that shift ability, so being able to shift onto that 1-cost Cinderella for just 5 could be a pivotal moment in this game, and Jonathan is going to be hoping to find an efficient answer to that as soon as possible.
Yeah, I do believe he's holding a... I need to get a better look at his hand. Nonetheless, there are Merlin crabs in the deck.
Okay.
A way to help his other characters get over the Cinderella stout-hearted.
Definitely.
Of course, she is a resist 2 with 5 willpower. So in essence, you need to do 7 damage in 1 turn, which can be done with Madam Mim Fox and Merlin crab. So there is an answer there.
It is going to be And Then Along Came Zeus, drawn by Guillaume, which can be a little bit awkward because, of course, Ariel, not a card you want to ink, but if Guillaume wants to get that Cindy down this turn, Ariel will have to be sent to the inkwell, of course, And Then Along Came Zeus could be sung by the Cinderella after it shifts. Alternatively, it could be sung by Rapunzel, or Guillaume might just want to save it for a later turn. And Baker, you make a great point about the crab. Crab is definitely one of the best answers Jonathan has to deal with Guillaume's Cinderella stout-hearted. In fact, it's one of the best answers around. A crab and a fox can combine for 7 strength in a single swoop.
Yep, that's right. And just even helps with some of these bulkier bodies like the Rapunzel, because Emerald Amethyst is a great color combination, but it isn't really known for its high-strength characters, generally speaking. Of course, you utilize things like fox. And then, yeah, things like the Merlin crab can help to boost up to very high numbers so you can deal with these much bigger threats.
Yeah, so Guillaume, of course, also has the option of playing Ariel this turn instead, hoping to find a song, and then just playing the Cinderella a turn later. Definitely worth slowing the game down at these crucial pivotal moments. It is decided by Guillaume to ink the Ariel. Not too happy about that, I think. Now, Jonathan doesn't know the last card in Guillaume's hand. Well, they do now. I was going to say they could probably get a read. It might be uninkable with the fact that they're inking that Ariel. So it's going to be Rapunzel singing Zeus. It's going to be Pete removing the Madam Mim, and as a song card has been played this turn, Cinderella Stout-Hearted can suddenly challenge readied characters, shutting down Jonathan's ability to shift in that wonderful enchanted Ursula Sea Witch Queen next turn.
Absolutely, the Cinderella with her singing sword ability, for those of you that may be newer to Lorcana and wondering why that happened. Yep, as Joe said, when you sing a song, you can challenge a ready character, and I do think that caught Jonathan off guard for a moment. There was a little look of, I'm ready. Oh yeah, singing sword, fair enough. And down comes that Merlin rabbit to draw a card. And an interesting point, Joe, I was talking about this during the Steel Song versus Ruby Amethyst matchup the other day. The Ruby Amethyst player, when they know they're up against Steel Song and Whole New World, there's always this kind of decision that you have to make of, do you want to start playing your rabbits and drawing cards with friends and stuff? Because at any point you've got to expect the Whole New World. So generally you like to spend turns 3 or 4 playing just bigger bodies, things like Merlin Goat. But at this particular moment, Guillaume with a completely empty hand, of course he could top the Whole New World, but maybe since Guillaume has an empty hand, Jonathan will feel a little bit more confident about just gaining resources, just extending that draw.
Yeah, I do believe that was Ursula Sea Witch Queen inked, although if it was, there is another in the hand. Jonathan, 1 ink left after spending 4 on the rabbit. Rafiki would be a nice option, but even with the crab in hand, Rafiki plus crab is going to deal 6 damage to Cinderella. But with that resist, it's not going to be enough. 7 is the magic number to deal with that Cinderella, and you really just want to deal with it in a single swoop. Guillaume is on top deck mode. I didn't catch what it was. Something like an aerial would be great right about now, Baker, but of course it was forced to be inked last turn.
Yeah, you got to think Guillaume wants to build to that whole new world. He doesn't want to spend the whole game just topping off the top of the deck. Of course, the Cinderella Stout-Hearted is a nice piece to have on the board. It's going to secure him a little bit of control, but Guillaume is going to be aware, again, they've seen each other's deck lists, that Jonathan has things like this Merlin Crab, which could come out of nowhere and deal with it. Not with this Rafiki, as you said, but if we can just go Crab into Fox, then that gets the job done. We're already at 5 ink, so it would only take 1 more ink to be able to open up a play like that.
Guillaume, with a lead of 5 lore to 3, is going to start things off by going on a quest with Cinderella Stout-Hearted. 3 lore gained by that Cindy.
She's such an aggressive quester.
No quest from Smee or Rapunzel, and no card played by Guillaume. 1 card in hand, and it remains in hand for now. Jonathan has in hand a Banzai, a Crab, an Ursula Sea Witch Queen, and 1 other card to the left there, which I can't quite make out at this moment in time.
It's a goat.
Okay, Banzai, of course, uninkable. The rest are inkable. But you really, Jonathan would love a character with 4 strength here to try and deal with that Cinderella. That resist 2 is really problematic. It's not like you can go Crab plus Rafiki to deal 6 and then the rabbit to finish it off, because the rabbit will deal 0 damage. It is going to be the goat. 1 lore gained for Jonathan, who is creeping back up towards Guillaume. Guillaume at 8 lore. It's going to be a quest with the rabbit. Jonathan now 3 lore behind.
Yeah, it makes sense, and this Merlin Goat does have that 4 strength, which in combination with the Crab will be able to deal with Cinderella on a subsequent turn, taking out Guillaume's biggest piece. And you think Guillaume probably doesn't really want to be doing much challenging with the Cinderella, would rather just be able to quest as much as possible. But if they can play a song this turn, maybe they want to take out the Goat. Unfortunately, there are no songs. We see another Cinderella Stout-Hearted, and that big bad Pete Games referee.
Yeah, and I can start to see why Guillaume played nothing at all. They could have, of course, inked the Cinderella Stout-Hearted last turn, as it was Pete that they just drew, but instead deciding to just hold off, see what they draw, and now Guillaume's in an interesting position where they could play Pete. Alternatively, if they want to be a little bit more cheeky, they could ink Pete, hope to find another inkable card off the top, which would allow them to play Cinderella Stout-Hearted next turn. If they decide to play nothing at all, or play the Pete, that Cinderella isn't going to be able to come down for at least another 2 turns. Unless, Baker, you shift Cinderella onto Cinderella, but I don't think that sounds too wise.
No, it could be fun, but it's not a play that I am expecting, although maybe we can find another ballroom sensation Cinderella to make that a little easier. But no, I think you make a good read. This Pete could be destined for the inkwell. We are going to be challenging into that Merlin Rabbit with Cinderella Stout-Hearted. She takes no damage from the challenge due to the resist 2. We are going to be inking that Pete, just as you called, Joe. It does seem that Guillaume is on that same wavelength. Let's try and get to play this second Stout-Hearted, because Emerald Amethyst doesn't have a lot of, doesn't have board wipe or anything like that. So these 2 Cinderella Stout-Hearted are going to take a lot of work, but I imagine 1 is destined for the discard pile now, as there is a Goat and a Crab in hand.
Yeah, getting that Goat down on the board in the previous turn. Jonathan now can go for the Crab, the Goat, 7 damage in a single swoop. That's exactly what Jonathan needed. The Goat is banished, but it's job done for the Goat. And moreover, the Merlin Crab, the Merlin cards combining in spectacular fashion. In comes a Hyena, it's Banzai.
Yep, now Jonathan's starting to put back some pressure of his own. With the Cinderella Stout-Hearted gone, his board is a little bit safer. There is, of course, a Mr. Smee with that 3-3, but that Smee challenging into anything other than Rafiki's would take itself out.
Yep. And Rafiki is going to go on a quest for 1. The other 3 cards were all played this turn. Guillaume off the top finds the whole new world, and that is not the card Guillaume wanted at this moment in time. A huge moment in this series. Cinderella cost 7 ink. Guillaume has 6 ink. Jonathan, having just removed that Cinderella, means Guillaume doesn't have a Singer to play with either. Smee's going to trade into Rafiki. and pass, turn, and look at the reaction from Jonathan. What is going on there? They're trying to make the read. What is happening to Guillaume's hand that they would pass with 2 cards in hand?
Yeah, that's got to be running through Jonathan's mind. He is going to play down Lyle, Tiberius, Rock, one of my favorite cards at the moment in the game on play. Give Reckless, which is going to be given to Rapunzel. And of course, Lyle also have the ability that whenever one of your characters is banished, banished at all in any way, your opponent loses a law. The Rafiki going to be trading into that Mr. Smee to take some stats off the board. And now there is simply a Rapunzel on board, which firstly has to challenge next turn, so can't quest for 2. But only has 1 strength. So this Crab and Bonsai feeling pretty safe at the moment to quest up. And then I imagine we're going over to Guillaume. And Joe, is this a position where Guillaume is forced to just play this whole new world just to refresh the hand?
Yeah, and look, it's another uninkable Baker.
Yep.
Having said that, Rapunzel Reckless can't quest, but it can sing.
Nice.
Let the Storm Rage on, which is exactly what happens. Guillaume going to be hoping for an inkable card. This time does find it with Rapunzel. So finally we might see that Cinderella Stout-Hearted hit the board, Baker. There she is.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. And like, this is a much better situation where now Guillaume, if he does really want to sing this whole new world, at least he can sing it with Cinderella and then still have a plethora of ink to make further plays. But worth mentioning, this Crab on Jonathan's board, the Challenger 3 ability is also when you leave play, so it's still a threat. And yes, down comes that set championship Ursula Sea Witch Queen.
And this is huge timing. Cinderella, Stout-Hearted, is able to sing Whole New World usually, but Ursula Sea Witch Queen, she has many abilities, one of which reads, other characters cannot exert to sing songs. Poor Cinderella Stout-Hearted, she's been given the mute button by Ursula Sea Witch Queen. No singing allowed. Lyle and the Crab are going to remove Rapunzel from the board as well. It's all going a little bit wrong for Guillaume at this moment in time. What's the card off the top? It's going to be Lawrence.
Lawrence, the butler. We've still got that whole new world, but as Joe just said, this Cinderella cannot sing it anymore. Ursula Sea Witch Queen hates singing, Joe. It's like you when I sing Be Prepared too much. Absolutely hates it. But yeah, this whole new world, I don't know. I mean, Lawrence is not a bad body to put down on the board. Cinderella could take out this Merlin Crab. In fact, that's the move I'm predicting here, because of course, while this Crab sits on the board, all it would take is a Fox in hand, and then that Fox would have 7 strength and take out the Cinderella if exerted. So yeah, that is the play we're going to see. Challenging the Crab, get rid of that Challenger 3, only take 1 damage because of the resist 2, and down comes Lawrence, who quests for 2 and has 0-4 stat line, but while he has no damage, gains 4 strength, which is a pretty nice body.
Yeah, and Lyle continues to get its value with that Crab being removed from the board.
Good
It is
point.
going to be 1 lost for Guillaume. Guillaume deciding to go for the Crab over the Lyle. Usually you would prioritize the Lyle there, but wanting to get rid of that Crab to avoid it being bounced back to allow the Cinderella Stout-Hearted to be removed again by a character with 4 strength, or with the 1 damage counter, even a 3 strength character, given that Crab buff would remove Cindy. So that's why Guillaume going for the Lyle instead of the Crab. Jonathan with a card drawn for the start of the turn. Guillaume with 1 card in hand, and of course it is that whole new world. In comes Lyle.
Another Reckless given to the... Was it given to the Cinderella Stout-Hearted?
It certainly was.
Very good. So even if Jonathan doesn't turn and like exert or quest anything this turn, then this Cinderella won't be able to quest. It's you must challenge if able, but you still can't quest for the turn. So that's a little bit of pressure off. Guillaume sitting at 6 law at the moment to Jonathan's 10.
Yeah, Jonathan really jumping ahead. They've been doing quite a bit of questing recently, but also that Lyle removing law from Guillaume. And another part of Ursula Sea Witch Queen's ability is when this character quests, exert a character of your choice. And Lawrence is decided upon.
Joe, I quite like this move. So the Lyle going into the Lawrence takes itself out. But now that there are damage counters on this Lawrence, its strength goes down to 0, which is going to mean it's going to struggle to take out this Ursula Sea Witch Queen.
Oh my goodness, Baker.
Oh, what do you do?
Double whole new world in hand for Guillaume. And remember, Cinderella cannot sing songs. We've got Ariel Voiceless in Disney Lorcana. Well, right now, Cinderella Stout-Hearted should be renamed Cinderella Voiceless because she is not allowed to sing. Guillaume's got 2 options. Option 1, they play a whole new world for 5 ink. Option 2, they play a whole new world for 5 ink. Which whole new world will they go for? Of course, it doesn't matter.
I mean, it matters to you. You like to be specific about which one it is. But yeah, playing the whole new world, both players spinning the wheel of their deck to refresh a new 7 cards. And Guillaume finding a nice selection. Prince Naveen, another Stout-Hearted. We've got a Long Came Zeus, a couple of Storms, a Strength. So we've got a lot of removal options. Lots of songs for that Prince Naveen to sing on play. And of course, these Cinderella Stout-Hearted is just a constant headache to Jonathan. And finding another one is pretty good. But this Sea Witch Queen is putting in an awful lot of work in this matchup, just as I said may be the case.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Even though Jonathan didn't get that shift down, I think just paid 7 ink for it in the end. But that was all that they needed to do. Have to say, Guillaume's draws just came at the wrong time, but Jonathan, with that Ursula Deceiver discarding that whole new world early on, really set the precedent for this game. And then Guillaume's top decks, when they needed it, just weren't quite as kind as they could have been. It was Cinderella Stout-Hearted into Pete, into whole new world, into Lawrence, into whole new world. Something like that. It just didn't quite go their way with the top decks, when a whole new world a few turns earlier would have been perfect, but then they both arrived at the exact wrong moment.
And Guillaume, with only 2 ink left to play, unless he hasn't inked for the turn, but you had to pay 5 for that whole new world, so definitely limited in terms of what they can do this turn. They are going to ink that Strength of a Raging Fire, and we're going to pay 3 to sing, to play, not sing, because none of our characters can sing with Ursa Sea Witch Queen. We're just going to pay for it the hard way and put 2 damage on Ursa Sea Witch Queen, and then the Cinderella Stout-Hearted is going to finally remove it from the board, only taking 2 damage because of that resist 2. Nice tempo play from Guillaume.
Cinderella has found her voice again. Ursula has been defeated, and Guillaume is now able to sing songs again at will. And I do believe we've seen both Ursula Sea Witch Queens now gone from Jonathan, one into the inkwell, one onto the board. So I don't think we're going to be seeing that again in game number 1 here.
And just a quick note, if you too would like to defeat Ursula, pick up the Illumineers quest, Deep Trouble. It's an awful lot of fun.
Absolutely, really fun co-op way of playing Disney Lorcana. Ursula was this big bad in many ways of the 4th set. We are into Shimmering Skies, and Ursula Sea Witch Queen didn't really put in that much work in the metagame. As we've mentioned, Emerald Amethyst struggled a bit up against set 4's Emerald Steel, but now that Bucky is gone, Ursula is very much returned in Shimmering Skies.
She's returned again. It seems that we cannot get rid of this Sea Witch Queen, but I'm sure that Jonathan is going to be looking to play another one. I'm actually just going to double check the deck list. Yeah, it's a 2 count of Sea Witch Queen, but did you say that you think he inked one earlier on in the game?
Inked,
If that's the case, then there are no more available. Of course, Amethyst Emerald does not have any options to return characters from the discard. You would need amber cards to be able to do stuff like that, like Hades or Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah, Guillaume at 5 lore. A few turns ago, they were around 7 or 8, but Lyle Tiberius Rourke had other ideas. 1 Lyle has been removed already, but there's another remaining on the board. Jonathan, of course, with a fresh 8 cards after the whole new world and drawing for turn. Quite a lot of options available to them. Often, Baker, if I'm playing Emerald and my opponent plays a whole new world, I'm really hoping to draw into an Ursula Deceiver, because then you can just play it down, see what your opponent's got, discard any song cards. Not an option that Jonathan has available right now, unless a rabbit draws into one.
Yeah, no, there is potential for that. Oh, we are looking at this crab, which...
Changes mind.
Yep, there we are going to go for the rabbit, get that card draw online. Again, Jonathan does have the lore advantage, sitting at 13 to Guillaume's 5, so has a little bit of breathing room. Down comes that Merlin Crab, giving Challenger 3 to Lyle Tiberius Rock, and then challenging into that Cinderella Stout-Hearted, and finally removing her from the board. This Cinderella Stout-Hearted versus Ursa Sea Witch Queen are like the boss monsters of these guys' decks.
Absolutely. That Cinderella did have some damage counters on it from earlier on, I think 2 from the Sea Witch Queen.
That's right.
So Lyle and the Crab dealing a total of 5 damage. With that resist, it was just enough to take down Cindy. Jonathan with 1 ink remaining that is not being spent, and it's back on over to Guillaume. And this is exactly why you want that Ursula Deceiver after a whole new world, because Guillaume now has that Prince Naveen legendary card, which can play a song card from hand for free when it enters the board. 2 cards for the price of 1. That sounds like a pretty good deal.
It is a pretty good deal, and of course, another whole new world in that hand. And again, the Steel Song decks, generally speaking, they like to be able to go nice and wide against decks where they kind of have that privilege. Obviously, you need to be a little bit more cautious if you're against things like Under the Sea or Big Sisu. Be prepared. But generally speaking, the power of Steel Song is his ability to use these singers, play these songs super cheap, play out a lot of bodies, play a whole new world, refresh your resources, and just create too much pressure for your opponent to be able to answer. But yeah, Ursula Deceiver, there's probably a couple more in the deck, so I'm sure they'll put in some more work later. Yeah,
and let's not forget, Guillaume's Lawrence with those 2 damage counters, it's really a 0-4 character right now, which quests for 2. Lots of ink. Oh, you've got rid of my 2 Cindy's, I'll have another one. And there you go, have another one.
Just for good measure, you can have the stout-hearted, you can have the warrior, and you can have the beautiful ballroom sensation. A bit of both, I love it.
Now, Jonathan has drawn into that Ursula, and it comes down straight away, and with the potential to bounce it back and replay it multiple times. That is a huge moment in this game. 3 songs to choose from. It's a whole new world, and then along came Zeus, and let the storm rage on.
So this is a super interesting decision, depending on what Jonathan's got, because Jonathan's got a couple of rabbits here. So if he can take away that whole new world, then he knows that he's in a situation where, okay, well, I'm going to be able to replenish my draw with these rabbits. You've already lost 3 lost 2. This would be the 3rd, but does opt to take that along came Zeus, restricting Guillaume's ability to control the board.
Yep, super interesting. I think we might be seeing the Ursula bounce back, though. It's going to be the snake.
You're right.
Ursula back into the hand, ready to go again.
Yep, you're certainly right. This bounce engine works so nicely with Ursula Deceiver. When we do play her for a second time, goodbye a whole new world, leaving Guillaume with just Prince Naveen and Let the Storm Rage On. Of course, Let the Storm Rage On will allow Guillaume to draw another card. But yeah, this is a great start. Jonathan taking away Guillaume's options while knowing that he has rabbits to be able to replenish his own hand. Super strong turn.
Yeah, Jonathan currently at 13 lore, 7 lore away, so they're not quite in that position where they can just start questing. They have to still consider trying to get a little bit of board control. You're welcome an option for Jonathan to sing with the rabbit. Could target one of their own cards or could target one of their opponents, but instead, Jonathan going to quest for 2 with that rabbit and crab. Of course, the snake and the Ursula were played this turn, and the ink is drying on those cards, and therefore they cannot quest.
Yeah, and we are getting to that point in the game that you always have to worry about when you're against an Amethyst deck. This sort of 13, 14, 15, that you get to a point where Goat plus Bounce can just become so incredibly powerful and just get you that final bit of the way. We are at 15 lore for Jonathan. He is going to play down this Madam Mim Fox, bounce that rabbit back to the hand, draw an additional card. This Fox does have Rush, but there are no ready exerted characters.
Baker, what's so interesting, the top card of the deck there for Jonathan was an Ursula Deceiver, which if they'd ordered things in a little bit of a more greedy way, they could have actually top decked into that Ursula Deceiver and maybe even gotten rid of that Let the Storm Rage On. Like if they were to have hypothetically sung You're Welcome with the rabbit, they could have drawn into that Ursula and then also discarded the Storm Rage On. Now, of course, Jonathan had no idea that was the top card of the deck. But worth noting, they would have been very heavily rewarded if they did try to draw a card there.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting to look at these different lines that players could have taken and see how that could have resulted in. But yeah, Jonathan doesn't have the information that we have, but sometimes playing greedy is the way to win in Lorcana. Sometimes you just need to. Guillaume is going to exert 4. Play down that Rapunzel gifted with healing. We're going to remove 2 damage from the Lawrence, draw a couple of cards, and then Lawrence, because of his ability and he has no damage counters anymore, is going to go back to that big 4 strength.
It absolutely is. 2 Robin Hoods drawn for Guillaume, the 1 cost and the 5 cost. Prince Naveen is itching and waiting to get into the action here. Of course, that Let the Storm Rage On could be played for free if Prince Naveen is played. Alternatively, though, Guillaume might just want to sing Let the Storm Rage On with this Cindy Ballroom sensation and maybe spend ink elsewhere.
Yeah, even if nothing else, just to dig a little bit more. Guillaume doesn't have a lot of options here and nothing too much for this Prince Naveen to do. But don't forget, this Cinderella Stout-Hearted is still on board, has proved a really formidable threat throughout the course of the game. But Jonathan has that Merlin crab down. So Guillaume may be really incentivized to take out the crab this turn, to take away that possibility of bouncing it back with Fox and then challenging a potentially exerted Cinderella Stout-Hearted. A little flick through Guillaume's hand, weighing up the options. We've got a Robin Hood there, the Prince Naveen that we've mentioned, the Storm. And then I think that's our champion of Sherwood towards the back. We are indeed going to take that line, challenging into the Crab with the Lawrence, who gets 3 damage and goes back to 0 strength. Down comes the Robin Hood, champion of Sherwood. No shift, we're just paying 5. This is a super strong looking board for Guillaume. And then questing with the Cinderella Stout-Hearted, taking him up to 8.
Absolutely. Jonathan, 5 lore away, can quest for 3. So Guillaume is basically saying to Jonathan, if you have a go and you have a bounce, it's going to be your game. But Jonathan does not, as far as I'm aware, currently have a goat available. But that, of course, could all change when they draw a card to start the turn. Cinderella Ballroom Sensation is the final card which Guillaume is considering. Of course, the Robin Hood and the Rapunzel were played this turn. So Cindy is the last action which Guillaume can take, and decides to quest for 1 lore up to 9.
Yep, and that's interesting because there are 10 lore represented on board through characters. So now that they've gone to 9, they could potentially get to 19. So that we are technically on a 2-turn clock if nothing is interrupted. But as you say, Jonathan readying up can go to 18 this turn. Do we have a goat? I'm not seeing it, Joe. I'm seeing rabbits and Ursulas.
Yeah, I think another Ursula Deceiver here was just drawn, and that Ursula Deceiver that's just drawn comes straight down, discards the Let the Storm Rage On. Guillaume with Prince Naveen and Robin Hood left in hand.
Not a lot of options left, and Jonathan threatening to get closer and closer to game. But of course, even when he does quest with these 3 characters, assuming he does so, the Guillaume's board will be able to potentially deal with it, but not anymore, because Jonathan is going to say, what can I say except you're welcome for the 2 cards that you get to draw, but you do need to shuffle that Cinderella back into your deck.
Yep, and then Guillaume is going to draw 2 cards, which the risk of this for Jonathan is if Guillaume draws into a song card, suddenly Prince Naveen's back on. But there's 2 song cards. Jonathan was hoping to counter this by just maybe replaying an Ursula and discarding 1. But look at the face here for Jonathan, seeing 2 song cards drawn. That is not what they were hoping to see.
No, 1 would have been just the icing on the cake, but has to make the choice, does opt to take away that strength of a Raging Fire, which of course has a much greater damage output than Let the Storm Rage On. Storm lets you draw, but opting to get rid of that strength. And now a decision to be made on how he wants to go about questing. Is going to do so with 3 characters, taking us up to 18. Guillaume will be able to answer a couple of these characters. The Robin Hood, of course, will be able to deal 3 damage. The Lawrence at the moment has 0 strength, so it would take a Rapunzel to get that back online, which at the moment we're not seeing. We're going to ready up. This is a big top deck, Joe. And what do we see? It's another Prince Naveen.
Now, it's not all over just yet, Baker. Guillaume needs to be able to remove the whole board except 1 character. So at least one of these readied Ursulas have to be removed. Guillaume doesn't have enough in hand right now, but of course, Let the Storm Rage On could draw another card. And that's why Jonathan got rid of this Cinderella Stout-Hearted. That can challenge ready characters if a song is played. But with no Cinderella on the board, or at least no Cinderella Stout-Hearted, these Ursulas cannot be challenged while ready. Guillaume has to find some more damage to remove at least 1 of these readied Ursulas, or it will be game 1 to Jonathan while going second.
Looks like we're looking at exerting 4. I do think we are considering playing that Prince Naveen to immediately sing Let the Storm Rage On, and then hopefully just find another one, really, because as you say, if we can't interrupt at least 1 of these Ursulas, it is going to be a GG. Down comes the Prince Naveen, going to sing that Let the Storm Rage On, dealing 2 damage.
Yeah, so for Guillaume, there is a couple of outs. There's another damage spell, for example, damage song, which could deal some damage to an Ursula. Alternatively, if they've got a 4th Cinderella Stout-Hearted, because I think we've already seen 3, that could perhaps be shifted into play. Guillaume, of course, does and can check which cards are in their discard, but they're not allowed to look at their ink. Well, if they inked a Cinderella earlier on, they might forget. And it looks like there is only 3 Cindy's in the deck.
Yep.
And I think we've seen all 3. It is 2 damage onto the readied Ursula, the exerted Ursula rather, which I'm surprised by. But regardless, Guillaume doesn't find a song or a Cindy off the draw. And I think that means that Jonathan's 2 Ursula Deceivers are safe and sound. Jonathan just 2 lore away. Looks like they're going to be able to quest for 1 with each Ursula, which of course goes from 18 to 20. I don't think Guillaume can stop Jonathan crossing the line here just by the skin of their teeth.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think the writing's on the wall. We are going to still just play it out, though. Put down that Lawrence, put down Robin Hood, probably questing with this Lawrence and this Rapunzel to get us a little closer to home, get up to 15. But as you say, Jonathan is free and clear at 18 lore to just quest with these 2 Ursula Deceivers. Ursula, just in general, has put in so much work for Jonathan, not just the Deceiver, but the Sea Witch Queen, absolutely repping. And there we go, both of them questing to 20, and Guillaume nods and says, yep, let's go to game 2.
Well, I think we have to say a big congratulations to Jonathan, but also a big congratulations to the people in the chat who picked such an incredible matchup. That was just game 1 of 3 in the game that is the battle for the golden Mickey Mouse. Amethyst Emerald, despite being the lower seed and going second in game 1, just about does the business. What a game that was, Baker.
Yeah, super interesting. And like the back and forth, the Cinderella stout-hearted, putting in so much work, not just from a questing perspective, but that singing sword challenging ready characters. I think at first caught Jonathan a little bit off guard. If I get the chance, I'll ask him about that. It was just the look on his face when he originally challenged the ready characters. That put in a lot of work. But on the flip side, the Ursula Sea Witch Queen shutting down the singing songs. And yeah, Guillaume really had a lot to like pull back from there with that turn where they just had the whole new world, drew into another one, had to pay 5 for it. Not the best tempo play.
Yeah, both players shuffling their decks, focused and ready for game 2, of course. Day 2 here of Disney Lorcana Challenge in Birmingham. It is best of 3s. The losing player in game 1 can go first in game 2, so Guillaume will be going first yet again. That Rapunzel gifted with healing behind each player, which is a great reminder of what these players have already accomplished this weekend in Birmingham. They've secured their invitations to the European Championships at Disneyland Paris in December. They've got themselves a Rapunzel gifted with healing foil promo, a Cinderella stout-hearted foil promo, a Let It Go foil promo, a Dragonfire participation, and last but not least, they've also got that foil Rapunzel gifted with healing playmat. But one big prize is on offer for this game. A single card that's name is Mickey Mouse Brave Little Tailor, and it is going to be a serialized version. Jonathan, 1 game away from getting their hands on that Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse, arguably the most famous and beloved character of all time. You could certainly make the argument for it. And yeah, to have that gold card, a super exclusive, serialized, only you will have the one of your number. So yeah, a lot to play for. This is it. We're going to take a look at the opening hands for both the players. For Jonathan, we see a couple of 5th spirits, a couple of goats going to choose. Is that just holding 1 and we mulliganing 5? Yes, that does seem to be the case. Holding on to 1 card. Yep, and mulliganing for 6, sorry. And Guillaume, how many cards have they thrown down?
I didn't catch Guillaume's mulligan.
At least 3.
Definitely the player going first again. And Jonathan just really making sure to wait yet again. We saw that in game 1, where they just wait for Guillaume to mulligan and then they do the business. I think interesting, talking about Amber Steel Songs, Baker, Daisy Duck nowhere to be seen as of yet for Guillaume. It is a card which you do often see in these Amber Steel decks. It helps when you go first, but when going second, it can be a little bit detrimental at times.
Yeah, Daisy Duck is certainly a card that a lot of Steel Song players are benefiting from, but I've also seen plenty of lists where they opt not to do it purely because they're already playing so many uninkables, especially these decks that are on the higher counter Prince Naveen. But Daisy Duck's certainly a fantastic option for these decks. We're going to ink that bare necessities, forget about your worries and your strife, play down a Cinderella Ballroom Sensation, and passing over to Jonathan, who's going to take his first turn of game 2.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, Baker. I don't like the look of Jonathan's hand here. No Ursula the Deceiver for turn 2. That uninkable Merfolk, of course, could come down this turn. And Jonathan really just considering now at this moment, they started to exert, and now they're having second thoughts. If Jonathan was to top deck into an Ursula the Deceiver here, they might just want to be playing that. And Cinderella, if you put a Merfolk down on the board, you're really just asking for it to be removed. So I like the decision from Jonathan not to play the Merfolk. Cindy's going to quest for 1. Will Jonathan be rewarded with an Ursula Deceiver top deck? It's not. It's an Amethyst card tucked at the back. Whatever card it is right at the back is what they just drew, but I can't quite...
I think it's Belle Accomplished Mystic. Oh, no, it's Elsa 5th Spirit.
Right.
It's Elsa 5th Spirit.
A very heavy curve here for Jonathan. No 2-drop. Does still have that Merfolk available if they want to play it, but might just want to try and hold on to it. It's a tricky position to be in. Guillaume, if they're paying attention to what Jonathan's doing with the ink, might just get the read. It's there anyway. It does now hit the board, and look at that, Jonathan not too happy about that. We saw the mulligan this Merfolk Baker in game number 1. I'm fairly sure they drew into this after the mulligan here in game number 2.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Merfolk's such a strong card, but as you say, while facing down a Ballroom Sensation Cinderella with that Singer 3 and access to Storm Rage on, it is not the safest play. Guillaume also with Mr. Smee on the board from the previous turn, who will be free to quest this turn if they so wish. A couple of Petes to shut down those actions. Nice body of characters, hand of characters, should I say, for Guillaume here to really apply some pressure. And you're right, Jonathan's curve seems super late, but could get there. We certainly will. Could still pull it out.
Yeah, Cinderella and Smee, the cards from turn 1 and turn 2 for Guillaume. Of course, this turn can go to 3 ink and play a 3-cost character if they desire. Lawrence is in there. There's a couple of Petes as well. A whole hand of inkable options here for Guillaume, and they're really taking their time, making sure they make the right decision on what to ink. Smee's going to quest for 2. Of course, the concern for Guillaume, if they quest with the Cindy here, Baker, is a Madam M. Fox could rush in, bounce that Merfolk back, and remove the Cindy in a single swoop. I think Jonathan Baker going to be super relieved to see that this Cinderella doesn't have a song to sing right now.
Yeah, absolutely, and must have been expecting it. And Jonathan, unfortunately, not holding a Fox, but you're absolutely right. Guillaume making the right decision and not questing with that Cinderella Ballroom Sensation. It just wouldn't be worth it. That's such an important piece, not just as a singer, but I'm sure he would like a repeat performance of game 1 and getting that Cinderella Stout-Hearted down nice and early. There are 3 copies in the deck.
I also find it really interesting to go back to turn 2 for Guillaume, where they inked that Strength of a Raging Fire. Had Jonathan played that Merfolk on turn 1, Cinderella could have sung Strength, removed the Merfolk, but Jonathan just delayed it a turn and kind of tricked Guillaume into inking that card. Suddenly, it's a Merfolk with a battering ram. The Crab and the Merfolk combine, and Mr. Smee removed.
What a thing, Joe. Giving Challenger 3 to this Merfolk so it can compete with the Bumbling Mate and removing him. And of course, with this Crab still on the board, just from leaving play also gives Challenger 3. So remains a threat that could potentially do a lot of damage to any characters that Guillaume wants to turn sideways.
Yeah, really love the play so far from Jonathan, making some unorthodox plays with that Cursed Merfolk. Again, not playing it on turn 1, mulliganing it away in game 1, and not even questing with it for 2, but challenging with a 0 strength card, thanks to the power of Merlin Crab. Guillaume can go up to 4 ink this turn, of course. Pete, Rapunzel, Smee, and Cindy in hand. Could play Rapunzel for 4. Guillaume decides, I'm going to play
nothing.
Exactly.
We've seen it a lot throughout the course of this tournament, Joe. We keep highlighting it. Sometimes the best plays are where you do the least. Yep. Down comes a Merlin Rabbit for Jonathan, drawing him an additional card. And I want to emphasize this again. Just the presence of this Merlin Crab does kind of restrict Guillaume on the kind of moves they make. Of course, Lawrence is, you know, it's just there to be a body. It can quest for 2. It's not the end of the world if it's removed, but maybe is putting Guillaume off of playing things like that. We do see that Stout-Hearted Cinderella, which is a great card, but this Crab can help deal with it. There's a whole new world in hand as well.
4 ink available for Guillaume. Can go to 5 this turn. Could shift in the Cindy, could sing a whole new world. It could be a big turn indeed for Guillaume. They held on to that Rapunzel on the last turn, maybe hoping to draw some cards with it.
And something super interesting, Joe, is that Jonathan is holding this Elsa 5th Spirit. They're about to have 5 ink on their next turn. There we go. I was about to say, if this shift doesn't happen, we could see this Ballroom Sensation removed before it can happen. But there we see the Stout-Hearted going down. It is now too late for that 5th Spirit to deal with the Ballroom Sensation Cinderella. And just passing over. No quest, nothing, because obviously, like I said, this Crab plus Fox just deals with it immediately. We are going to see that 5th Spirit come down, exert the Lawrence. Elsa is going to challenge in because she does have Rush and Evasive. Does 2 damage to Lawrence, taking him down to 0, meaning the Crab can, the Rabbit can finish the job without taking any damage, but the Elsa, of course, did take 4 from that initial challenge.
Absolutely. And Guillaume not wanting to sing a whole new world with Cinderella the previous turn, perhaps fearing that they're going to allow Jonathan to draw into that fox to take out the Cindy, draws Ariel, and Ariel is not a bad card to draw into at all. Remember that Cinderella can challenge readied characters if you play a song this turn. So perhaps the Cindy could start trying to challenge that crab to remove it from the board. If Ariel can find Guillaume a nice and cheap song.
Yep, as long as we can find a song that we have enough to pay for, or we do, we wouldn't be able to sing it with Cinderella.
Here we go. Let's see. It's a Zeus. It's a Storm Rage on. It's a Strength. Not quite 4 songs, but it's 3 songs. And a singer, of course. One can be revealed, added to the hand. The rest go onto the bottom of the deck in an order of your choosing. So the choice, Baker, is Zeus, Storm Rage on, or Strength. Strength is the best pick if you want ink.
How much ink does Guillaume have left for this turn? We paid 3 for the aerial. We've got 2 in the inkwell. Has he inked this turn?
Nope.
No, I don't believe he has.
So Let the Storm Rage on is selected.
Sure.
Rapunzel is going to be inked to allow Guillaume to pay 3 for the Storm Rage on. Cleans up the Elsa, draws another Rapunzel, and suddenly that crab gets challenged and removed. And again, Baker.
Amazing play.
That same reaction from Jonathan, like, huh? Challenging my ready?
It does catch people off guard, but yeah, that singing sword is so incredibly powerful. Look at the amount of bodies that Guillaume was able to remove that turn. The crab, which is really a threat to that Cinderella Stout-Hearted and that Elsa 5th Spirit.
Yeah, Guillaume taking that Storm Rage on. It polished up the Elsa. It drew them a card, and it drew them into a Rapunzel, which they had just felt a little bit bad about inking. And here we go for Jonathan now. An abundance of cards available. Ursula Deceiver, I think they're considering inking. It gets inked, which is funny because it would actually be quite good at dealing with that whole new world. In comes a crab. The rabbit now with 5 strength, but 6 is needed to remove that Cindy. But there we go, it's the fox. The fox bounces back the crab. It's a 7 strength fox, and it's see you later, Cinderella.
Yep, that fox plus crab combination is exactly what you needed to deal with that Cinderella Stout-Hearted at full 5 willpower and the resist 2. Really nice combat move there from Jonathan to get rid of that threat. Guillaume is going to draw into the bare necessities, which I don't believe Jonathan is holding any non-character cards at the moment. Obviously not that Guillaume knows that, but we're going to see the Aerial Spectacular Singer is going to challenge into the rabbit, doing 2 damage to herself. Down comes the Rapunzel Gifted with healing, removing that damage, allowing a 2-card draw.
My goodness, Baker. It's another whole new world.
It's another one. Goodness me. And
whole new world and a Cinderella Ballroom sensation found off the top for Guillaume. They could have sung a whole new world already, Baker, but clearly they don't want to because they went for the Rapunzel play instead, probably fearing the card quality Jonathan could get would be really, really high. But they have not been rewarded here with the whole new worlds. 2 in hand. It happened in game 1. It's happened again in game 2. And it's only 3 lore on the board here, despite being very far into this game. It is a nail-biter.
You're absolutely right. And yeah, you got to think Guillaume would much prefer the idea of singing this whole new world with Ariel on a subsequent turn, but I don't think he's going to get the chance as the rabbit is returned to the hand due to the Madam Mim Fox. We are going to challenge in. The Fox does survive that challenge. So yeah, if Guillaume wants to play this whole new world next turn, they either need to just pay for it or top a Cinderella Stout-Hearted to do it that way.
Absolutely. I mean, the Crab Baker really has been the star of the show in many ways here for Jonathan.
I think so.
Helping them deal with those Cinderella Stout-Hearteds. Guillaume could have sung a whole new world with that Aerial, went for the Rapunzel heal instead, and is now left in a position with 2 whole new worlds in their hand and no Singer 5 available. Having said that, Baker, a Cinderella Stout-Hearted off the top would provide them with an opportunity to shift in and sing a whole new world instantly. Jonathan, lots of ink exerted. It's 4 ink for the rabbit. Another card drawn. And it's back on over to Guillaume. Surely not a 3rd whole new world. It's not. It's a Storm Rage on.
It's a Storm Rage on, which this Cinderella Ballroom sensation could either sing or you could just pay for it with ink to remove this fox or put a couple of damage on the rabbit, try and find ourselves another card. And as you say, only two, player 1 on 3 lore, player 2, Jonathan, on 2 lore. A very different story to the first game, Joe. By this point in that game, both players were around the 8 to 10 mark. So a much more conservative game. That Ballroom Sensation Cinderella is going to be exerted, singing Let the Storm Rage On, doing 2 damage to the Madam Mim Fox. To remove it, we find a Piglet Pooh Pirate Captain, which is a great way to start applying pressure to the board. If we can play that down this turn, and if we can keep 2 characters on board or extend again next turn, and it will quest for 3.
Piglet's great, but when you've got this much ink available, something like a Robin Hood, something like a Cindy would have been considerably better.
You're right.
Guillaume with a couple of options. They could play the Piglet. Alternatively, is it time to just go for the whole new world? Jonathan does have a lot of cards in hand after drawing off the rabbit. The problem is you want to sing a whole new world. You don't want to spend 5 ink to do it. It's going to be Piglet onto the board. Guillaume not wanting to spend 5 for that whole new world, but does go for it, in fact. Plays the Piglet and the whole new world, and then it's most likely just going to be inking one of the new 7 cards they draw into.
Yeah, I expect so, and hey, they could ink, and then if they've drawn into another Cinderella or a Robin Hood, they could continue to extend. A couple of the Prince Naveen's, there's a Ballroom Sensation Cinderella, a Robin Hood, and we saw once again the star of the show for Guillaume, that Cinderella Stout-Hearted, back on the hand. We're going to flick a Long Came Zeus to the top of the hand. It looks like Rapunzel is going to be singing this to take out that Merlin rabbit. It is important to remove these rabbits if you can. You don't want them constantly bouncing back to the hand and drawing even more resources.
Yep, Jonathan, of course, draws a card when the rabbit is banished, which means that Jonathan's now going to be at 8 cards, ready to go to 9 cards at the start of their turn, thanks to that whole new world from Guillaume. Guillaume yet to ink this turn. Remember, that Piglet was played onto the board, which allows them to ink one of their fresh cards. And they also do have a 1-cost Cindy, which could come down instead. Cindy going to be inked, and no card is going to be played, it seems. Both players just having a little chat about something, making sure everything's all good and ready to go.
I just want to take another quick look through this list while our players are having a little conversation. Our Steel Song player, not playing any copies of Grab Your Swords, in case anyone at home was wondering. As we said, the 3 copies of Cinderella, Stout-Hearted, the full 4 copies of Pete, 3 Piglet. Yeah, this is looking pretty solid Steel Song list. And then our EA Tempo player, of course, we've seen that Clarabelle engine is there. We haven't seen it really highlighted yet, but she is there. And our EA Tempo player is playing a 2-2 line of the Mother Gothel line, which is a another nice way of that, and could remove the Cinderella Stout-Hearted that way, potentially, if it's the only character on the board. So a couple of Shimmering Skies cards being represented in Jonathan's EA Tempo deck. It seems we have inked that Cinderella. I think perhaps there was a deliberation about whether or not Guillaume had inked, but he certainly hadn't, so he's free to do so here, I believe.
Yep. And it's definitely right for Jonathan just to make sure that everything there is right. It's easily done. These turns can take a long time. No cards on the board for Jonathan, but it's going to be 9 cards in hand once they draw for turn.
You are right. Plenty of cards, but no board presence for Jonathan. And Guillaume with quite a few cards of his own and a few threats down with
that Ursula's there, Baker.
That's great to see.
It's definitely the card I'm looking for the most after a whole new world. Jonathan agrees. Straight down onto the board and
is rewarded.
Let the Storm Rage on Naveen was ready and waiting for Guillaume, but it's been disrupted by the menacing Ursula Deceiver. Well, what a card that has been in this matchup. And I think we're really seeing some of the value here, Baker, of Amethyst paired with Emerald. We've seen the Crab putting in some serious work for Amethyst. And then on the flip side, Ursula Deceiver for Emerald, really just combining well to give you control on the board, but also disrupting your opponent's game plan at the same time.
You're absolutely right. And Jonathan not only removing the Storm Rage on, but getting a glimpse of the hand and seeing that Stout-Hearted is in the hand is something that Jonathan now has to respect, because there's a Ballroom Sensation on the board. And Jonathan has learnt a couple of times now from experience in this game that singing a song for Cinderella Stout-Hearted, if Guillaume can find one, will allow him to challenge ready characters. We're going to see a bit of an extension here. Rafiki, Mystical Fighter, and Clarabelle hitting the board. We need to get some board presence. We need to get some lore on the wheel. And passing back over to Guillaume is going to ready, set, draw, as is the standard in the Disney Lorcana trading card game. Find another Pete off the top to shut down those actions.
Yeah, no song found for Guillaume, which I'm sure they're going to be a little bit upset about that. Ursula really getting a lot of value, disrupting the Prince Naveen play, which Guillaume was waiting for. 2 Pete's as well. Does have that Cinderella Stout-Hearted. 5 ink can be spent to shift it on to the Cinderella Ballroom Sensation. Piglet Pooh Pirate Captain here can quest for 3. Currently, it is Guillaume with 3 lore, Jonathan with 2, but not for much longer. In comes Cinderella Stout-Hearted. In comes Prince Naveen, but there's no song forthcoming thanks to the Ursula the Deceiver.
Yeah, the Ursula the Deceiver came just in time because this could have been a very different move. That Prince Naveen would be singing a song, and then the Stout-Hearted would be allowed to challenge ready characters. As it is, the Cinderella Stout-Hearted is just going to be questing, taking us up to 6 lore, and now the race. I feel like the race is going to start. It's been a battle of attrition, like both players just fighting for control of the board and resources, and now I feel like we're at the point where you're going to start to see a lot of trade, you're going to see a lot of questing as we start to push on. We've got 11 minutes, or just under 12 minutes remaining. Jonathan is 1 game up. If Guillaume can take this victory, then we will be going to a game 3.
Yeah, that Belle Accomplished Mystic could be a card Guillaume's forgotten about, because I think there's only 1 copy of it. And it was a very long time ago now that the players looked at each other's deck lists. So that could be a little bit of surprise value. Jonathan able to move damage counters from 1 card to another. Of course, going to be wanting to deal with that Cinderella Stout-Hearted as quickly as possible. You're welcome is an option to be sung with the rabbit to get rid of it and shuffle it back into the deck. But it does come at the cost of Guillaume drawing a couple of cards. So Jonathan, lots of options available. It is going to be You're Welcome. It is going to be sung by the rabbit. And it is going to be the Cinderella Stout-Hearted and the Ballroom Sensation it was shifted onto, shuffled back into the deck. And Guillaume is going to draw 2 fresh new cards.
Yeah, great play. Guillaume already has a quite sufficiently filled hand. An extra 2 could make all the difference, but that Cinderella Stout-Hearted really does have to go. There's already so much lore on board. That Piglet questing for 3, as long as there's 2 other characters, then 4 from the Rapunzel and the Naveen combined. So yeah, Jonathan really needs to slow down and potentially just be ahead in this race, especially because at the moment he's only on 2 lore. Not many high questing characters on board, but we do see the shift. Down comes a card I know you like a lot, Joe.
It's Clarabelle. Baker just packed 1 of his own. Clarabelle shifting for 5 ink, combining with You're Welcome. Jonathan added cards to Guillaume's hand just now. Well, Clarabelle synergizes with that, as Clarabelle is going to be able to provide Jonathan with some extra card draw if they have less cards in hand than Guillaume. And we're also going to see another card hit the board there. It's going to be a goat.
Nice
9
goat.
ink spent here by Jonathan and singing You're Welcome. Clarabelle is going to draw them 2 cards as they end their turn, and it's back on over to Guillaume. It is still a 6 lore to 3 lead for Guillaume. And hello, off the top, it's and then along came Zeus, and that is going to be pretty tasty with Prince Naveen.
Yeah, no, this Prince Naveen with Singer 6. I mean, it's a 4-cost character anyway, but that Singer 6 can sing anything of 6 or less. And yeah, that would be a super nice way to be able to deal with some of these bodies. Is Clarabelle a 5/6?
It is a 5/6.
5/6. So
absolute unit of a card.
She a big cow. I'm so proud of her. But yeah, that Zeus certainly not enough to get the job done, but perhaps in correlation with a Storm Rage on or something if we can find it. I do think, though, even though Guillaume is ahead on lore, and this turn could potentially quest for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, taking him all the way to 13, Jonathan seems to have the more oppressive board, but Robin Hood, champion of Sherwood, coming down, changes it, and Prince Naveen is going to sing that Along Came Zeus straight away. Yep. Who's the target here, Joe, do you think?
Well, Clarabelle would still have a little bit of willpower remaining. She would be the most tempting option if it removed her. It's a really tricky question.
It is.
It could be the GOAT because of that 4 strength, perhaps. It is going to be Clarabelle, so Clarabelle with 1 damage counter more needed to finish her off. And it's going to pass back on over to Jonathan. No question from Guillaume. It's a bit of a standoff here.
Sure is. And the reason I asked that, Joe, is because I was trying to think myself, what does the most realistic target here seem to be? I think that's a good choice to just get some 5 damage on the Clarabelle, but there was always a good argument for the Rabbit and the Goat for their damage, plus their in and out of play abilities, but opting to put the damage on the cow.
Yeah, and I think the decisions here from Guillaume not to quest is one of the higher skill ceiling aspects of Lorcana. You have to pick your moment when to quest. What I would imagine Guillaume is waiting to do is be able to quest with so many characters that Jonathan can't remove them all at once. If Guillaume was questing now, Jonathan would have more characters available to just remove everything in a swoop, and then Guillaume quests again in the next turn, and then maybe Jonathan can remove those. Whereas Guillaume is just trying to wait to develop a wide enough board to quest with lots of things at once, and therefore that gives him the best chance to protect it. But there it is, the bell!
Oh, this is a big move!
3 damage counters moved from Clarabelle onto Prince Naveen. The one of Bell accomplished mystic for Jonathan has caught Guillaume by surprise.
What a move, Joe, and certainly something that I don't think Guillaume saw coming. Otherwise, perhaps would have reconsidered that Long Came Zeus on the Clarabelle. What a play this Bell accomplished mystic has been putting in some work. I think I blame you, to be honest, Joe.
It is going to be the Ursula, and Guillaume's last card in hand is an aerial, which can fetch a song, but it's not a song itself. But the board is so wide, we need a bigger table, everybody. We need a bigger table here. Banzai comes in as well. I've never seen so many characters on the board all at once with so little lore on the score.
Finally, this is going to quest to take Jonathan up an extra lore. And yeah, are we going even further? We are questing with that Merlin Rabbit as well. It does seem that the race is beginning.
What a game. And again, big congratulations to the chat, to our audience for picking such an amazing matchup. It has been an incredible one. Jonathan, the 35th seed, has gone second in both games. Remember, it's another quest, and it's 6 lore apiece.
And speaking of 6, that is how many minutes are left remaining for this game. And if Guillaume is able to win, we will need to find the time for a game 3 or play as much of it as we can. Of course, that would be judge deliberation. But if Jonathan can cinch it up in the time remaining, he will proceed. If you're only just joining us, this is the top 16 game for the Disney Lorcana Challenge. Both players are already qualified for the European Championships. They're playing for the Mickey Mouse. Cinderella Stout-Hearted going to challenge into that Bell accomplished mystic, taking a little bit of damage. Down comes the Rapunzel, healing a lot of that damage back up and drawing another 3 cards. This is an incredible board. Look at this go.
It absolutely is. It is a Robin Hood, not that Cinderella. So Robin Hood gaining a couple of lore as well, Baker, when taking that challenge. So really nice synergy, gaining lore while challenging, healing with Rapunzel, drawing a bunch of new cards. It's a Cinderella, it's a Rapunzel, it's a Zeus, and an aerial. That is an incredible little play from Guillaume.
Sure is. Yes, my apologies. The Robin Hood champion of Sherwood, not the Stout-Hearted, but there is one now in Guillaume's hand, so that could be coming down before too long. We're at 6 to 8 lore. We have just under 5 minutes remaining. What an incredible game. Both these players have certainly earned their place in this top 16 game.
Yeah, and Guillaume at 8 lore, currently on the board. I think with characters that are able to quest still, they could gain another 7 this turn. 2 for each Rapunzel, 2 for Naveen. In fact, 9 lore would be available for Guillaume to quest with everything up to 17. So they're getting very, very close indeed to that margin. I think one Rapunzel actually was played this turn. So one Rapunzel not able to quest, but they are getting up to that point, Baker, where they're getting close to that magical 20 mark. Even though they're still down at 8, with so many characters around, that can change very, very quickly.
Yeah, even if we just quest for 7, then we are now, we're technically saying check, because we have the bodies on board to be able to then get finish off next turn. But of course, Jonathan with an equally impressive board of characters. We are going to challenge into that Merlin Rabbit to remove it, taking a couple of damage ourselves, just trying to alleviate some of these threats that can shut down Guillaume's questing characters. Jonathan with how much lore on the board himself? 2 from Bonsai, 2 from Bell, and then 5, 6, 7 from the Clarabelle, 8 from Rafiki. And what's the card at the top there, Exerted?
Ursula Deceiver.
That's an Ursula Deceiver. Lots going on.
Played Strength of a Raging Fire, the only song found by Guillaume. So that's, of course, going to go into the hand. Now, Guillaume's drawing a lot here with the aerial, with the Rapunzels, but of course, when there's a Clarabelle on the other side of the board, Jonathan could also draw themselves. However, Guillaume might have a plan up their sleeve to deal with that Clarabelle. Strength of a Raging Fire is going to target Belle, removing them from the board, and then Rapunzel's going to sing, and then along came Zeus, and this time Clarabelle will be finished off by Zeus.
What a turn in trying to alleviate some of the pressure on Jonathan's side of the board. We've got a Rapunzel and a Stout-Hearted in hand, and then on the other side of the board we see a rabbit, a snake, and a Rafiki. So that rabbit can help us find some more cards, but not a whole lot else going on. No crabs, Joe, no foxes to be able to alleviate some of this pressure. This is looking pretty good for Guillaume so far.
And that Piglet Baker finally does something. It came down about 6 or 7 turns ago. It has been sat, waiting and ready, but it is finally exerted to quest, and it quests for 3.
A Pooh Pirate Captain always waits for orders, and finally they have received them. Go on a quest for me, Piglet. Get me 3 lore. Jonathan holding a rabbit, a snake, a Rafiki, and a... I can't quite make out the last card there. It looks like a 3 cost.
That'd be your Lyle, I think.
You may be right. Yes, it is indeed. The Lyle Tiberius Roar can give Reckless to a character, so that can offset Guillaume a little bit. Guillaume at 11 lore right now, and we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lore on board if we assume that Piglet is questing for 3.
Yeah, so Jonathan now in a position where they're not going to be able to quest themselves, but rather is going to have to start taking some challenges. It's going to be the rabbit to start things off. Jonathan's going to draw a card, and those Lyles, though, Baker, also give Jonathan an interesting option, providing Reckless to their opponent's characters so they can't quest, but also whenever one of Jonathan's characters is banished, Guillaume could lose lore. So those Lyles might arrive just at the right moment. Jonathan has already spent 4 ink on the rabbit. Do they have 6 ink to go for the double Lyle? I have a feeling that they do.
We have the inked Rafiki, and yeah, double Lyle here could be super, super good, because with 2 Lyles, we'd lose 2 lore for every character banished, which could really start to offset Guillaume's lead that they've worked for here.
Yep. So 1 Lyle comes down. I think Jonathan just deciding which character to provide Reckless to. It's going to be Rapunzel. So this Rapunzel here to the left is Reckless. It cannot challenge next turn. Sorry, it cannot quest next turn. It must challenge available. And there's the double Lyle. Piglet Pooh Pirate Captain. Also given Reckless, it cannot quest next turn. But here we go. It's the Lyle show. Ursula removes the Prince Naveen.
That's 2 lore.
2 lore removed for Guillaume, thanks to the double Lyle going from 11 down to 9.
Oh, that hurts. And you can see Guillaume not happy with that. Knew how close he was to cinching up this second game. Jonathan, mate, really doing the calculations here. Which characters do I want to take out? Which of my characters am I using? And am I questing at all this turn?
Jonathan has played a rabbit and 2 Lyles this turn for a total of 10 ink. Rafiki, Banzai, and Ursula are readied and waiting, and 2 of them are going to challenge Robin Hood.
Super interesting, Joe, because I was wondering if potentially we'd be going into Rapunzel to take that out but survive the hit. But, of course, this Robin Hood with the... Oh, we're going to extend the handshake. Guillaume is...
We're just going to work out exactly what's happening and let you guys know exactly what the plan is. It looks like time might have been called there on the round, and I think Jonathan has been claimed victorious.
I believe time has been called, and it looks like Guillaume has making the decision to just say, I can't come back from this. I do believe that's the case.
Jonathan is the winner. Jonathan is the winner there. Take